Hello, everyone. I'm Eric Bolling, along with Kimberly Guilfoyle, Kirsten Powers, Dana Perino, and Greg Gutfeld. It's 5 o'clock in New York City, and this is The Five. According to President Obama, we've got ISIS contained. Terror isn't the world's biggest threat. It's climate change. So let's battle the weather with all our might.
Nothing will deter us from building the future we want for our children. What greater rejection of those who would tear down our world than marshaling our best efforts to save it? I believe, in the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., that there is such a thing as being too late. And when it comes to climate change, that hour is almost upon us.
Our Commander-in-Chief talking tough today about a very dangerous enemy we need to slay.
One of the enemies that we'll be fighting at this conference is cynicism. The notion we can't do anything about climate change.
Well, the future of the planet is at stake, Mr. President. It's threatened by jihadism, not the weather. Now, KG, President Obama today announced that the United States is, quote, the second largest emitter, while suggesting climate change is a driving force behind terror. Put those two comments together, and you get the President of the United States literally blaming America for terrorism. Am I wrong?
Well, no, I'm going to agree with the call of the question. I mean, when you put it together, those are the semantics that he's driving forward. This is the narrative and the ideology that he has been consistent in espousing from day one. If you see the man in the measure of his words and his enthusiasm and his passion for climate change, this is where his focus is and his attention. He does not want to have to deal with ISIS whatsoever. It's significantly getting in the way of his own personal ideology and agenda. I mean, you just see it. This is where he feels most comfortable talking about this. This is who he is. This is his climate skin. He's good to go. Not
necessarily a terror alarmist, but a climate alarmist.
Well, you know what? The reason for this, transference, it's easier for leftists to champion a cause in which we are at fault. You cannot do that with Islamic terror. You can't blame it on us unless through the machinations of climate change. Now, I say we should throw it right back at them. Like, climate hysteria actually causes terror. For example, activism is fueling a war against coal. They want to get rid of coal. There are 1 billion people on this planet who are not on the electrical grid. They are living in poverty, burning impure fuels. That makes them vulnerable to the desperate move into cities where they aren't wanted, i.e. they end up becoming fodder for terror machines. So by preventing these poor people from getting cheap fuel, you're actually making them vulnerable to terror. So in a sense, it is his climate conference, it is his climate hysteria that is leading to terrorism.
All right, Dan, we'll get to Dana in a second. But Kirsten, yes. President Obama connected climate change to terror, yet I don't see Christians, I don't see Jews blowing people up and beheading people on the basis of climate change. I'm seeing radical jihadists doing it.
Well, okay, I'll say a couple of things. First of all, I think you can care about both things, and that's the problem. You actually can care about terrorism and climate change. The problem is when you start linking them together. Now, if we want to look at the Department of Defense, though, all the way back in the Bush administration, was saying that climate change is a national security risk to the United States. I think the president's going a little bit further, though. I think when you start talking specifically about terrorism, and I think we know there are a lot of root causes to terrorism, that if you take climate change out of the equation, it's still going to be happening, right?
Yeah. Dana, is it a cheap shot to do what he did today?
Well, I think one of the problems that the left has had on climate change, getting any sort of solutions that they would be satisfied with, is that they speak about climate change in these apocalyptic terms that just goes way overboard, and it makes you think, well, can they not actually deal with both issues at the same time? Because I agree with Kirsten, but what really I think is interesting, well, at least to me, is that I see terror as the root is evil. Okay, climate change is a scientific issue that is it's based on how we actually fuel all of our lives. And if it's real or not, I happen to think that you can at least try to believe that the science is real and then take measures to deal with it. Our carbon footprint in the United States has actually been shrinking over the last 15 years, while ISIS, their footprint is growing. And that is where they are able to plot and plan attacks that could actually hurt people today. So I do think that they could have done two things at once.
A couple of stats while you bring it up. The carbon footprint of that climate change summit, 300,000 tons of CO2 emitted.
Imagine what this effort could have been devoted to, like in terror, if you would replace climate change with with the word terror when he said, when it comes to terror, that hour is almost upon us. That would make sense. Like obsessing over climate change during the time of ISIS, it's like shaving your legs while you're on the Hindenburg. It makes no sense at all. This link about the drought.
Except for the autopsy.
Yes, that's true. You'll look great in the autopsy. That's true.
Honestly.
You want to look nice.
Yeah.
But think about the drought being linked to the Syrian civil war. The wheat yields have quadrupled since 1990. They haven't had a problem with the farmers have not had a problem. So why would that link be made? Perhaps because it absolves President Obama from his failure during the Arab Spring. If it's climate change, it's not Obama's fault.
KG, also, these climate activists, you see, they destroyed a couple of the memorials to the Paris terror victims today. I mean, talk about total disregard for humanity.
Total disregard for the sanctity of human life, for unity of nations coming together to unite against a common enemy of jihad. Total lack of prioritization in terms of where the focus should be. Sure, we can talk and we can discuss weather and climate change. Fantastic. After we're done with the patient that's bleeding out on the table. So anybody who goes into a room, you see like a gaping chest wound, it's open, you go to close that and address that. Then you move to the other areas in the extremities that are non-life threatening. That's the problem I have with it. We can focus on a lot of things at the same time, but anybody with a reasonable sense of intelligence and urgency for the situation at hand is going to prioritize in the right way and effectuate change in that direction, and we're not seeing that.
All right, let's move on now to the climate hysteria. Today, President Obama recited that same discredited comment Al Gore delivered years ago. Listen.
I saw the effects of climate change firsthand in our northernmost state, Alaska, where the sea is already swallowing villages and eroding shorelines, where permafrost thaws and the tundra burns, where glaciers are melting at a pace unprecedented in modern times. And it was a preview of one possible future, a glimpse of our children's fate if the climate keeps changing faster than our efforts to address it. Submerged countries, abandoned cities, fields that no longer grow, political disruptions that trigger new conflict, and even more floods of desperate peoples seeking the sanctuary of nations not their own.
Sorry, Mr. President, Arctic ice is not actually melting, it's actually growing. And by the way, how are all those warmers going to explain the 19-year, quote, pause in temperatures? Dana, you chuckled during some of those, the pretty
well, it was like Walt Whitman.
elaborate comments.
Yeah. Yes, I mean, this is a speech that he's been wanting to give for a long time, right? It's not the State of the Union, it's the State of the World, according to President Obama. Like, he was never going to miss this conference. They've been working on it for 7 years.
Not even for golf.
Here's my big problem with it, though. One of the things that President Obama and John Kerry are saying in Paris is that there's going to be no enforceable language. So when you do all this huge conference, there's no enforceable language. The only goal is it can be achieved through national level action. And so you have the EPA executive action. It's not gone through Congress, and it's the Clean Power Plan. Over 50% of the states have sued the government. It's already looks like it's probably going to be turned around. And so basically, President Obama is saying, we're going to do our part through executive action, and even though it's illegal, and even though it's unlikely to be overturned, then when it gets to the courts, he will say, our entire foreign policy rests on this executive action, so therefore it cannot be overturned. So he's basically trying to put America in a box.
America in the box, even if China does get on board, Kirsten, India is a big emitter of carbon emissions, and they're poor.
Yeah.
They can't get on board
Well,
with
but this is the problem. Look, I think that climate change is a real problem. I will say I'm from Alaska. It's not quite the wasteland that he's describing it as, though it does feel a lot warmer to me than it used to be. I mean, to be honest with you, than when I was growing up, it's dramatically warmer.
Which is good for Alaska.
Exactly.
No, it's good. Then people will move there.
There's already people living there. Thank you very much.
Are you sure about that? I haven't seen the facts. I've heard thousands of people in there.
Check out Wikipedia. Yeah, they're good.
Exactly. You saw it on TV, probably.
Thousands. And they were cheering global warming. They were cheering.
And there's video. I'm sure there's video
saw
of
it on
that.
television. Yeah, but look, the problem is that you have, how do you get everybody on board? Even if we do everything right, how do you get the rest of the world to stop polluting and deal with it? And I think that that's one of the main problems.
Do you know what you do, though? You are somewhat like accurate and sincere about the statistics. The world temperatures are rising at half the pace of what the consensus said in 1990. They've never been correct. According to Prince Charles, when he said this 100 months ago, by this time, the world would be in ruin. They have to keep reconfiguring the apocalypse because they're always wrong. So because of the prior exaggerations, sensible people, American citizens, are skeptical. We need a foreign policy leader, not a Greenpeace volunteer right now.
That's the problem with it, the apocalyptic. And there are a lot of smart scientists who will say climate change is real, but apocalyptic climate change.
Can I also point out, KG, that Al Gore, this is COP21, Al Gore in COP15, 6 years ago, said by 2013, the North Pole, the polar cap, would be ice-free.
Oh, yeah, you chicken little.
And don't forget, the administration has been working very hard to basically dismantle coal jobs in the United States, even if they were clean coal jobs. I mean, these jobs are probably, unfortunately, not coming back without some sort of change in administration and direction soon. And that has led Hillary Clinton to say that she not only wants to continue the policies of Barack Obama, but in exchange for that, she will give you a handout of $30 billion so that you can be on welfare.
Buy your job.
Right. And your political loyalty.
Quietly.
And your vote.
This is just like climate change kabuki theater. You know
But
that,
you know what
right?
this
They're
is?
just like making themselves look good and feel good by doing this. And even the activist knows nothing's going to get accomplished.
Again, it's ocean privilege. We have our coal. We have our electricity. We have our iPhones. We have our automobiles. There are 1 billion people that are burning impure fuels that kill 3 million people a year. They're burning feces. They're burning trash because they don't have coal. So what we're doing is we're saying coal's bad. You can't have any. That makes them desperate. They move to areas to live a better life. They end up being vulnerable to the death machines and death cults of radical Islam.
On that high note.
You know it.
Next, one of our embassies is warning of an imminent terror threat within the next 2 days. We're going to tell you where and when the 5 returns.